Hey, this is Dominic, and this is your home for the cutting-edge conversations on optimizing your personal performance, lighting up your sex life, and living a purpose-driven life of your own design.
These are the topics that Dominic and I have both struggled with in our own lives and still don't always get right. This is Brian. Welcome to the Great Man Podcast.
According to Buddhist principles, the monkey mind is a term that refers to being unsettled, restless, or confused. The Buddha described the human mind as being filled with drunken monkeys, jumping around, screeching, chattering, and carrying on endlessly. Now, no doubt you've encountered your monkey mind when you've experienced financial stress, or you're experiencing inconvenient or debilitating illness. You're unhappy with your body or physical appearance. You had an embarrassing mishap in bed, or any other circumstance where you're encountering uncertainty, or you feel a lack of control, or you feel unsafe. This is when the monkeys in your mind can be very loud, and it can be easy to get absorbed in their three-ring circus. But you certainly don't want the monkeys behind the wheel of your car and driving your life. Except that's exactly what many of us do. So that's why today, in part 2 of our 3-part series on mindfulness for men, we've brought back the Great Man Within's resident mindfulness teacher, Mark Melvin, to help us identify and tame the monkey mind. So who is Mark Melvin? Well, for the last 12 years, Mark has been a corporate attorney, and that's actually changing in the next few days because he's leaving that corporate world behind, and I'll speak to that in a few minutes. But he's a yoga, meditation, and breathwork instructor and a one-on-one coach at heart. Mark is currently finishing up his master's in clinical mental health studies so he can be a certified counselor. He found yoga and meditation after he grew tired of binge drinking, isolating, and feeling uncomfortable in intimate relationships. And he was, in many cases, an indentured servant to his monkey mind back then. And Mark is one of the anchors in the Great Man Mastermind. He's a resident expert when it comes to all things mindfulness. So in this episode, Mark's going to help you to understand what is the monkey mind and how you developed your special, unique version of the monkey mind, because yours is different than mine. That's different than Brian's. That's different than Mark's. We'll talk about 5 of the ways that monkey mind may show up in your life to give you really tangible examples of how it shows up so you can identify it when it happens. And then 4 rules of engagement on how to deal with the monkey mind when it shows up. Here you have it, our second conversation on mindfulness for men, Taming the Monkey Mind, featuring our boy, Mark Melvin. So about 6 years ago, right around this time, I was on my 90-day radical sabbatical, traveling the world after I left a corporate career. And I found myself in a place that's known as the monkey forest in Ubud, Indonesia. This monkey forest is the first place I've ever been where you can actually mix it up with the monkeys. You walk in, there's a gazillion of these little guys hopping and jumping around. You buy these little bananas and they are fearless. They'll jump on your head. They'll jump on your arms. They'll jump on your shoulders. They'll come and snatch the bananas right out of your hand. And then they'll go off and, try and grab one from someone else. And there's some of the people that are there, like I guess the forest rangers or the monkey tenders, whatever. They walk around with a broomstick and they smack the monkeys that are a little too aggressive who are coming in, they'll steal a full bushel of bananas from your hands. And so these people will come around and tame the monkeys and put them back in their place. Mark, I imagine that is an entirely different strategy than what you're going to be talking about today as we talk about the monkey mind, what it is, and how to befriend that part of you to find a more mindful path. So Mark, welcome back to the show.
Good to be here, and too right you are. Beating the monkeys with sticks is not how we're going to be talking about dealing with the monkeys in our mind.
Damn it, I've certainly tried.
Usually on this podcast, when we're talking about beating monkeys, it's a completely different topic altogether. So I'm happy that we're changing subjects today.
Well, I'm happy that we're actually doing this episode right now because, Bri, in the time that you have known both Mark and I, we are both at our lowest points emotionally because of what we've been dealing with and very different things that he and I are both dealing with. But last week, I talked about how I've been dealing with, for the past 6 months, the biggest physical challenge of my life, recently being diagnosed with anemia. We don't know what's caused anemia, but anemia, for anyone who doesn't know, it's an iron deficiency. I don't have enough hemoglobin and red blood cells to carry enough oxygen to the tissues and muscles in my body. So I'm constantly tired, fatigued. I'm 40% of my physical capacity. I may sound fine on this episode, but after it's over, I'm exhausted, and I need hours to kind of recover from it. That's put me and my monkey mind to a state of hyperactivity, which I've had to navigate over these last 6 months. And Mark, I know that over the last, few months and kind of coming to a head over the last 2 or 3 weeks, you've been dealing with some really intense stuff. Maybe you can talk about what that is and then kind of lead that into this conversation around the monkey mind.
Yeah, absolutely. So, of course, I think it's fair to say that, COVID has had its impact, sort of on everything and everyone. So that's kind of a layer of what I've been experiencing. But over the course of these last 2 years, a few things, significant things have happened in my life. One, I've decided to completely change direction professionally. No longer going to be an attorney. And, the news there is that March 31st is my last day as an attorney, wrapping up what has been a 12-year legal career as a corporate lawyer.
Yeah, buddy. Nice job.
Thank you. Over the course of that time, I've also started graduate school, about to finish my coursework for a master's degree in clinical mental health counseling. Have also been building, of course, my yoga teaching practice as well as my individual coaching practice in that time. So, certainly a lot of things going on that on their own would be stressful. But for me, what's interesting, coming to the end of this career particularly is the fact that this is a career that I chose based on a very conditioned, sort of old, outdated version of myself. A version that drank. I was an alcohol lawyer. I wasn't an alcohol lawyer because I liked the area of law, right? I liked my clients.
Right.
And Mark, just so I'm clear, does that mean you're an attorney that drank a lot, or did you work in the industry of alcohol?
Both.
Yeah.
Both.
Okay.
And the reason I was an attorney that got to drink a lot is because my alcohol industry clients supplied me with plenty of free alcoholic beverages. So
nothing keeps you going
nothing
like
keeps
that.
you going
Yeah.
like that. There's a lot of old stuff, a lot of old emotions, a lot of old conditioning that's really being put to bed and kind of being wrapped up. I'm in the last 2 weeks, which transitioning out of a company as their general counsel is certainly, challenging in itself. But then last week, a couple stress bombs got dropped. Grandmother ended up in the hospital with COVID. She's fortunately home now, but, at 94 years old, that certainly had a very significant impact on her. And then also here for us at home, our 6-year-old dog, Bogey, who's otherwise in perfect health, immaculately cared for, immaculately loved. All of a sudden, his body is rejecting protein and not synthesizing and processing protein. Definitely something wrong with somewhere, probably his kidneys is what we believe, but we haven't been provided with any definitive answers yet. Certainly been a very scary and frightening time. We don't have answers. We don't have information. There's been a lot of sort of 24-hour kind of vigils watching him and making sure that he's stable and everything. So I can't really describe the sort of heartbreak that I feel that a creature, an animal is loving and just sort of gentle as this animal is going through something like this. And for my part, one of my real go-to emotional reactions is anger. It's anger. Mm-hmm. And, for me, what I've been experiencing lately, and I can kind of give it to you in an analogy, imagine someone coming into your home, right? You've got a dog. Imagine someone coming into your home, kidnapping your dog and holding it hostage, right? At that point, all that anger, it has a place to go and it has a way to be directed.
A villain. There's a villain.
There's a
right?
villain. Yeah. I can point to something and be like, that's what caused this. This is wrong. And I'm angry at you, dog kidnapper. But in this instance, it's life. I mean, life is happening. So when I sit with these feelings of anger and frustration, sadness, what do I point my finger at? Do I just get mad at life? And what I can tell you is that the monkeys in my mind, my own monkey mind says, yes, get mad at life. and I get what I refer to as a case of the fuck it's, right? It's just no matter what happens, fuck it, fuck this, fuck that.
Life is rigged against me, or life is dealing me a bad hand. Fuck it.
Yeah, like all the good I put out there, all the hard work I do, all the work I've done on myself, all the work I've done for others. Like, now you're taking my dog from me. Like, come on, life. That is sort of where my mind has been. Certainly these last couple weeks, just sort of looking to life, asking, like, why?
Mark, you're a very aware human being. And I'm curious, in this instance, how often do you know that you're in monkey mind, that your anger is coming from this place, or versus how much is there unawareness around it?
It's a great question. And for me personally, at this stage, because of the years of meditation and mindfulness practice, more often than not, when I am in monkey mind, I know it. And the reason I know it is because internally I'm experiencing turmoil, some sort of internal stress and turmoil. And I want to be very clear, what I'm talking about there, because, life is stressful. I mean, life constantly deals you stress in one way, shape, or form. So it's not the fact that I experience stress that tells me that I'm having monkey mind. It's the fact that I'm connecting with the stress in a way that causes me more pain. I'm identifying with the stress. I'm jumping in with the stress and sort of ruminating with it and sort of staying there. And the thoughts, going back to what Dom had mentioned earlier, when the thoughts arise around like life and anger and sort of wanting to indulge that's when I know that I'm in monkey mind. The way I put it the other day, and Dom, I know this is something that resonated with you, is for me right now, you kind of have to use your imagination for this a little bit. But, my essence, my great man within, if you will, is like 5 miles ahead of where my body and sort of my behavior are right now. I know that I'm not in alignment with that person who I really am. And it's because, of sort of the misdirected anger, the willingness to sort of stay in anger, to let it stew and to kind of point my finger at life, if you will, if that makes sense.
Mark, I know that we've said monkey mind a few times here, and I'm getting a sense for what that is based on the story that you're telling. But help us define it. Like, what exactly are we talking about when we say monkey mind?
Sure. If you want to look at sort of a historical or a traditional explanation, if you were to Google monkey mind, you would probably come on some site that said the Buddha described the undisciplined mind as a mind full of loud and noisy monkeys. So, in its sort of more traditional conception, when we talk about monkey mind, it's suggestive of an undisciplined mind. But, for me, I personally feel, whether it's true or not, feel that that's a little bit harsh. It could maybe be characterized more as sort of an untrained mind. But the way it shows up and the way people can experience it could be a number of things. First and foremost, it could be in the form of what we call, quote unquote, time travel, mental time travel. You're constantly ruminating on something old, or you're constantly fantasizing about something to come. When I sort of picture that, what I think about is George Costanza. If the jerk store called, they ran out of you. Jerk store is the answer. And for that whole episode, jerk store is the answer, jerk store is the answer, jerk store is the answer. That's monkey mind.
Hey, Mark, let's hit this one, because like the time travel and the fantasy thing is bigger than I think people understand.
Yeah.
So I used to time travel all the time, still do when I don't catch myself. And I remember there was this morning when I was in Sex Addicts Anonymous recovery meeting. It was a Sunday morning. I had gone to a concert the night before. I think I'd taken my sister to another one of those country music concerts that she loves going to. I take her every year for her birthday. And at this concert, when the concert was over, everyone's walking out in an orderly fashion. And there was this big 6'6" dude who just like plowed through everybody because he could. You know what I mean? He plowed through me, plowed through everyone in front of him, and then just, got out in front of everybody. And I remember feeling pissed and also disempowered, right? Because I was physically threatened by this guy. And what I did for the rest of the night in my mind was I equipped myself. I was almost like Napoleon Dynamite. I equipped myself with all of these like skills, like nunchuck skills and karate skills, where in my mind, I was beating the shit out of this guy. And I was putting rightful order back in place. And then everyone was cheering for me and I felt strong again. And I remember I told the story in the Sex Addicts Anonymous meeting thinking that I was going to be ridiculous. And like half the guys in the room were like, oh my God, I do that all the time. Like I will kill someone in my mind, or I'll tell them off in my mind, or what, like I'll rewrite the thing in my mind to help me deal with whatever discomfort, I felt in that situation. And throughout most of my life, I was either rewriting something that didn't feel good for me, or I was fantasizing about a future that would make me feel less anxious in the present moment.
It makes 100% sense. Certainly something I identify with, something I've done, something that I feel is probably a very common form of monkey mind for men, especially, and I love that word you use, especially when men feel disempowered or maybe emasculated a bit.
Yeah.
And
yes,
we're kind of jumping ahead a little bit, but this really gets into, how we sort of deal with the monkey mind. And with this example in particular, sort of the rewriting history so you can have a more powerful sort of version of the future. This is where we start to get curious with the monkeys, curious with the thoughts that we're playing with, and understanding, why is there a need to rewrite history? Why is there a need to feel more powerful in that moment? Because once we do that, it becomes less about like this thing happened to me and I'm going to fantasize away, what actually happened. And you become responsible for how you're feeling about that moment or about that event. You start to assume responsibility for yourself and what you experienced.
That's huge. Okay. So time travel was one of them.
Yep.
What else you got on the list?
Certainly people talk about having a mental board of directors, sort of the free floating mental chatter that's just kind of ongoing. And I think it's really important, again, to note that the brain produces thought randomly, constantly. It produces thought. And if we're up in our heads, again, which a lot of guys that we work with talk about, I'm stuck in my head. If you're stuck in your head, you're going to hear that mental chatter constantly. In your head, in your inner world is going to be a very noisy place. That's a way monkey mind shows up. It also shows up, and this is, an experience for me. And I've mentioned, here before that I've been diagnosed with obsessive compulsive disorder. That relates to experiences, from my very early childhood. And for me personally, the way that monkey mind shows up is in the form of what's referred to as intrusive thoughts, unwanted thoughts. And I know in the last episode, when you guys talked to Keith, you talked about this Michael Singer idea of we're not our minds. And I think where we get into trouble here is we have those intrusive or unwanted thoughts. And all of a sudden we start to identify as those thoughts. The problem there is when we start to get these intrusive or unwanted thoughts, maybe it raises a little bit of anxiety internally. So what we're going to do then is react. Instead of dealing with the thought, we react to the anxiety and we start to just behave impulsively.
One of our mentors, John O'Connor, he once told a story and he said, have you ever had those crazy thoughts? Like, what would happen if you were sitting at the subway? You just like slap the train as it was going by, right? Like for no other, you just hit the train, right? Or if I see a knife in the kitchen, the recognition that like I could stab myself or the person next to me, who's probably my partner. Like there's these crazy thoughts. And Mark, before you started talking about monkey mind, when I thought those things, because we all do, I thought I was going a little bit crazy. I thought, what is wrong with me? Oh my God, do I not like my partner? Do I want to hurt myself? Like, what is wrong with me? And then when I realized, like, these are just thoughts.
Yeah.
Like, the knife is there. Of course, it's sharp. You could stab somebody. You could not stab somebody. Like, I felt some sort of sense of empowerment. But without that recognition, I owned all my thoughts as mine and thought something was wrong with me.
Yeah. And so those examples are really interesting because they catch our attention, right? I remember one of the guys in our group was like, yeah, I was standing online at the bank the other day and there was a police officer in front of me and I saw his gun. And like for a brief moment, I thought about what would happen if I took his gun out and I started firing it everywhere, right? And like those capture our attention, but these other ones don't seem to catch our attention. We actually like get absorbed in our monkey mind. And like, two other examples that I wrote down were, number one is worst case scenarioing, right? So for example, like Mark, you and I work with a client. We've been working with him for the past year. We both have conversations with him today. He didn't even realize that whenever he found himself in a situation contemplating, hey, my business is being sold, or, our biggest client is coming in because they got a problem with us, his initial instinct was to go down the path of what's the worst case scenario that might happen here. And it started, I guess, from a standpoint of, let me play out everything and see if I can create a solution around these things. But he started worst case scenarioing when his kids got sick, worst case scenarioing in his romantic relationship, worst case scenarioing in everything, his financial situation, constantly living in a state of fear. And he wasn't aware that he was doing that. That's one other example. And then I think the other example I wrote down is this concept of snowballing. My monkey mind can snowball because I've been prone to anxiety, right? And snowballing, what I've experienced over these last 6 months with anemia, not knowing what it is, when I've woken up in the middle of the night and my heart's been palpitating, it'll be like, is there something wrong with me? Do I have cancer? Am I going to have a heart attack? Am I going to have a brain aneurysm? Like boom, 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 boom. And all of a sudden now I'm in this place where I am so wound up that this minor thing that I felt in my body has me now believing that I may have a terminal illness. So that's how monkey mind shows up in my reality. All right. So Mark, we talked about 4 types of monkey mind so far. You brought up, the time traveling, the intrusive thoughts. I added the worst case scenarioing and then the snowballing. I hear on good authority that there's a 5th kind of monkey mind. What do you got for us there?
Yeah, I feel, if we're sort of talking broadly, I feel another type of monkey mind is sort of lack of clarity. When you sort of don't know, there's thought, there's noise in there, but you're having trouble getting in touch with what it is. For me, sometimes this is reflective of mental dissipation and maybe a lack of mental energy.
I'll call that fog.
Yeah, fog. Exactly.
Something I noticed, Mark, and tell me if this is in this category or if this is somewhere different, but something we worked on when you brought this to our mastermind is this negative self-talk or this critical self-talk and the stories that repeat themselves over and over and over again. And I was not as aware of it before Thursday when we went through this exercise. And I gotta tell you, man, since then, it's been about a week. It's been really loud and really annoying. These different voices. Now, what's different is I can hear those now. They say things like, you're not smart enough. You're not good enough. It's usually the word enough is in there somewhere, somehow. And while I'm recognizing it and that's annoying, I can move on from it. Where is it? Is that rumination? Is that lack of clarity? How would you diagnose me here? Reoccurring, having trouble moving away from it. I think in some way this kind of relates to maybe the awfulizing. While the two processes are very different, I think there's something sort of underlying all of that may be common. Dom was talking earlier about, how he gets really involved sometimes with his monkey mind. He just really jumps in and just follows them where they're leading him. And sometimes I feel that's because, we need something in those moments to hold on to. Like we need something to grasp onto. We can't look down at our feet and recognize I've got 2 feet on the ground. I'm here right now, because it doesn't feel like that in our inner world. So we take those thoughts because they give us something that we believe is real, something that we can hold and something that we can embrace in that moment. And the weird thing is that those things that we embrace and those things that we hold, they don't always feel good. And a lot of times they really feel shitty. For me, it's self-righteous indignation, even more than self-criticism. If I start to get in that rumination state, start to rewrite history and have a more powerful future, then there's a lot of that going on there. That self-righteous indignation. My monkeys tell me, you're right, Mark. You're right. Show the world how right you are. Show the world how right you are. And because at that moment, like I feel like my feet are under me, I grab that and hold on to it because I need that. It's like a wet blanket.
It's in times of uncertainty where I grab onto the monkey mind intensely. So in the last 6 months, I don't know what's going on with me. I don't know how to fix my physical well-being, which has had an impact on my emotional well-being. And so with all that uncertainty, then when my monkey mind starts going, well, maybe it's cancer, or maybe it's a heart attack, or maybe you have, now I got something tangible to hold on to, like you're talking about. For our listeners, it's uncertain job situations or uncertain financial situation. then the monkey mind acts up and says, well, you're not good with money. You've never been good with money. Or, your parents weren't good with money. Blame them for teaching you what they taught. And that gives you something really tangible to hold on to, which may feel good in the moment, but it's toxic, right? And I think this then gets to the point that you were, going to bring us to, and I think this is a good pivot point in the conversation, which is now that we're aware of these different flavors of monkey mind, and we haven't exhausted all the flavors, we've just given you some common ones. Now, what do we do with that, Mark? My first reaction is I want to be like that forest ranger who takes the stick and beats the monkey and says, get the fuck off of me. But I found that doesn't work too well. So
stop
what would you
beating the monkey.
Yeah.
Damn it.
My first impulse is to always beat the monkeys.
I'm gonna make you a t-shirt that says stop beating your monkeys.
And that's it. We talk about when we experience monkey mind, what are the rules of engagement, right? And rule 1 is don't pick a fight with the monkeys. Don't get involved with them if you can avoid it. And, I can actually, I can go back to that example that you gave, Dom, because I think it's a really nice illustration. We're holding on to this thing of bananas. Hopefully, it's secure and that some monkey can't steal the whole bushel. But every single one of these monkeys is screaming, 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 screaming. There's no sense of urgency like, oh my God, that one screaming monkey has to get this banana right now. That urgency isn't there because you see all around you. There's bananas everywhere. There's people everywhere. That monkey's going to get a banana. There's no need to jump in with it. But for whatever reason, when it comes in the form of a thought, that loud screaming monkey, there's this urgency that comes up. We've got to jump in the ring with it. We've got to numb it out. We've got to push it away. We've got to judge ourselves for the thought. I think it's really important to understand where these monkeys are coming from to begin with. I feel this is incredibly important because it's sort of, plain English distillation of neurology and science. And not only that, but yogic theory as well. But, where we are today, what we're thinking and what we're feeling is the sum total of everything that we have accumulated over the course of our lives and potentially prior to that. In yoga, we talk about generational karma. I mean, there are things that have been passed down, levels of conditioning passed down in our families for generations that wind up with us. But the point is, everything that we experience is the sum total of all prior experience. So what you're experiencing right now, emotionally, cognitively, has its roots somewhere, and those roots likely are not in the present situation that you're dealing with. So again, taking the example of, let's say, a job, lack of money, you're not getting the promotion. Someone got promoted instead of you, and you're pissed off about it. You start awfulizing over the money. What's my life going to look like? What's my house going to look like? What's my car going to look like? I mean, all this stuff. Those stories about a lack of abundance aren't probably because you're scared that you're not going to have a nice enough car today. Not because you're scared or don't actually believe you're going to have a roof over your head and food to eat tomorrow. It's because something that you were taught 20 years ago, 30 years ago, 40 years ago, that's sort of developed into this sum total of what you're experiencing now.
A great example of this, Keith Barchi, who was on last week's episode, he shared this in a previous episode on the podcast, was he and his wife and his kids were going on a vacation, and his wife wanted to rent a convertible for the week, right? They were in some tropical area. And the convertible was going to cost $1,500 for the week versus a regular car was going to cost $750. And he felt like that his entire system explode, right? Like, can't do that. It's way too extravagant. We're wasting money. And he has this new sense of awareness. Monkey mind was in hyperactive gear, but he has this sense of awareness to pause and to breathe. And he was able to look at his conditioning, which, when he grew up, money was scarce. And when he started his business as an entrepreneur a number of years ago, money was scarce. And so he had to be much more frugal around his investment decisions. But that conditioning doesn't have access to his bank account right now, which is more than abundant. And so when he was able to take a breath, right, and look past that conditioning and into the present moment reality is he's got more than enough. This is going to make his wife and his kids thrilled, right? To have a convertible for the week. It will be a thing that they talk about for, he knows they're going to talk about it for weeks, months, years afterwards. And he's able to make the decision from the present moment versus that prior conditioning.
Yeah. And what you said there, Dom, is an incredibly important point. And it's the fact that Keith, in us as well, when we're aligned and, when we're feeling good, has that ability to pause, create space between himself and the stimulus, then address it and respond to it in a different way. And there's an important reason that works as well. And this really does get us sort of more fully into how we address this monkey mind. It, again, relates to creating space between yourself and whatever stimulus you received. Because ultimately, when a stimulus comes in, when we receive a sensory stimulus, and keep in mind, the mind is a sense organ, okay? It processes data from the environment and spits out something, just like our eyes do. So when these impulses or these impressions actually come in, the course of travel starts in the survival centers of our brain. So that's what picks up these impressions first, these experiences. Then it goes into the emotional centers of the brain where the amygdala lives. So a lot of that triggering feeling that we get based on just thoughts or emotions, it's fight or flight. It's what it is. It's an attack on our psychological identity or our emotional identity. So we get into fight or flight. And it's just, you can't really even you could measure the time with sensitive instruments. But lastly, it hits the executive centers of our brain in the prefrontal cortex. So you've had all this opportunity to get your survival instincts riled up, to get your emotional instincts riled up before you actually get to sort of treat this thing and deal with it like a human being using the executive centers of your brain. So what Keith is doing is that first initial survival impulse. He gets through that. That second impulse of emotionality and fight or flight. He gets through that. Finally, the messages are received by the prefrontal cortex. He takes a step back. I'm a human being dealing with this situation in the here and now. He does not have to compare it to something that happened 40 years ago. He can deal with that situation based on what's happening right now. So what he does is he brings himself fully into the present moment by taking that pause, taking that beat, giving himself a breath. So then the human parts of his brain can start to really take over the situation and start treating it, on a more human level using his executive functioning.
One of the number one questions that we often get from people is like, well, what is this inner work that you guys do? Or tell me more about the great man. Like, what is a great man compared to what you are today? And I feel like very seldom do we get to point at something we're talking to in the present. And this is a great story. This is a great definition of what it means to be a great man, to do the inner work. Because without that, without the work that Keith has done, both inside this group and outside the group, the monkey mind took over, right? He misses an opportunity to create a memory with his family, and he's living in the past, right? With the work he's done, Mark, I love how you describe that hitting our survival, hitting our emotion, and then our executive function, because it's the inner work, who the great man is one that can pause, that can take a breath, that can wait, and then live here and now.
Absolutely.
So it's such a simple story because things like that, stories like that, if we're aware, happen every single day of our lives.
Every day.
Totally.
Every day, all day long. I think one of my favorite things that Michael Singer says is that you can wake up every single day different if you're aware of these things, because every single moment can be a spiritual moment. Because being at the car rental center was a huge spiritual moment, enough for him to share on a podcast. And there are so many opportunities to do that every single day.
That is so beautiful because I think Dr. Joe Dispenza said, I think it's 90 to 95% of your thoughts are the same day over day. And we hear from the men in our community that one of the worst states of being is where we feel like we're stuck in that Groundhog's Day, right? The same worries. We wake up every day with the same shit. We go to work and experience the same obstacles and things that bother us and frustrations. And I certainly know what it's like, especially these last, 6 months or so. I've been having these recurring issues with like, God, how come I don't feel better? Nothing seems to be working. These supplements don't seem to be. It's the same shit packaged every day. But when I'm able to step away from that and see what's actually here in front of me, then life takes on a new sparkle. right? It's much more interesting. Like, and you said even something as mundane as, honey, can we get the convertible, can be a spiritual experience if we're fucking there for it.
Yesterday, I was in my garage, my favorite garage, and I was hanging a new set of lights. And I realized after about 3 hours of putting these things up on the ceiling, my shoulders are killing me. And I get to the very end. And at the end is where these lights have to connect perfectly. And I realize after hours of putting this together that the two wires, there's a male part and a female part. I got two male parts.
Oh my God.
And I got holes in the ceiling. I am ready to lose my shit. And here's what the monkey said. These fucking idiots! They gave me the wrong goddamn parts. How could they not warn us? Why is there not better instructions? I just wasted my fucking time. It's 11 p.m. at night. I want to go to bed. Like, the monkeys were that loud.
Yeah.
They were screaming that loud. And then Mark's voice came to me from a week ago. Said, well, what do we do? What do we do with this monkey? The monkeys are here. What do we do with them? And I was like, okay. I see you, monkey. I'm like, obviously upset. Like, what do you want to do with this? And I said, I wonder, like, they gave me these parts. I wonder if I can take apart these things that they gave me and put them back together differently. I don't know. Let's try. I've never done this before. So I got the wires out. I cut them. I reattached the female parts to where there was a male part before. I put it back up. And I got to tell you, the feeling I had when I connected the wires and all the lights lit up.
Like Clark Griswold on a...
It was that moment. And you know what happened? The monkeys went away immediately. They were gone.
Wow.
So as soon as I was like, Dominic, you're talking about that guy that pushed through the crowd before. Yeah. When the monkeys were screaming, I was like, I am going to email these guys tomorrow. If I can find a phone number, I'm going to fucking call them, tell them their product is shit.
Yeah.
Right? Because they gave me the wrong stuff. Like all of these stories happened. And as soon as, it actually wasn't when the lights connected. It was as soon as I said, let me see if I can do this differently.
Right.
And so that's been the value for me in this conversation about monkey mind, Mark. I mean, I lost it for about 5 minutes last night.
Yeah. Well, and what you did there, Brian, is really reflective of that sort of first rule of monkey mind. The first rule of engagement is don't pick a fight with the monkeys. Don't get involved with the monkeys. You know, we've already established the monkeys are there. They've been there your whole life. They've been there since you were a little kid. They sit there, they chatter, they make noise. Let them make noise. Let them make noise. Now, if we get ourselves into a situation where maybe there's some information worth dealing with, maybe there's something in there, then that's where we start to do some different work. And, you know, I'll go back again to Dom's story about waking up and some of the heart palpitations and what he's experienced. This is where it's incredibly important when you get into those moments that you are able on some level to take a couple deep breaths, take a step back, even if it means you stand up and you literally take one step backwards. Take a step backwards from yourself. Imagine you're leaving your mind out there. And it might be that you simply ask those monkeys, ask those thoughts, what is this you're trying to tell me? What is this you want me to see? What do I gain or what do I need to know from all of this information that you're putting into my head right now? And look, it's not like some monkey voice is going to just necessarily pop in your head. I want you to know A, B, and C. But what it does give you the opportunity to do, and this is the most important thing, is it just gives you some space. It gives you a chance to connect with yourself from a human level and not from a purely emotional level or from a level that's based purely on survival, right? So we bring ourselves up into the present. And from that place, we're much more well equipped to actually look at the thoughts with curiosity. So don't pick a fight with the monkeys. Don't pick a fight with yourself, and then start to explore them with curiosity if you're able to in that moment.
So is that rule engagement number 2?
Well, it's a little bit of a choose your own adventure because someone might say, well, I'm at work. I've got this monkey mind and I can't just sit there and do like a round of like self-awareness exploration and talk to my monkeys, you know, right now in the middle of a meeting. So what do I do? And for me, this sort of choose your own adventure is you're not going to pick a fight with yourself. You're not going to try to avert or numb out thought. Let your brain go. It's going anyway. We've said that. So if you've got the space, if you've got, if you're in the right environment to really just sit with the thoughts and ask them, be curious about them, then do that. If you're not, what I feel is very beneficial is if people are able to give themselves an awareness task. And for me, that's much different than pushing out or numbing. It's simply allowing our awareness to rest on something that's more productive, right? So in spiritual circles, that might be a mantra. Someone might have a mantra. If their brain really gets going and it's being unwieldy and undisciplined, they go into mantra. So that's where they shift that awareness until the mental noise starts to calm down. If you've ever read the book, which I know you all have, Man's Search for Meaning, for Viktor Frankl, it was his wife. It was that thing that no matter what the circumstances, no matter what was going on around him, no matter what he was feeling, he was able to connect with this idea of his most beloved, this most beloved thing in his life. And no matter what he was experiencing, by connecting with that, he was able to shift, he was able to get present, and he was able to do what he needed to do to survive in those environments that he was in. So certainly the curiosity is one angle. A shift in awareness is another approach that we could take to this.
So Mark, you're not saying give ourselves a new task, like something else to get productive on. You're saying go to something, a mantra, a person, a happy place or whatever. It sounds like another way to give ourselves space, to put ourselves in a different state.
There's that, but it could very well be a task, because when we're in sort of task forward mind, I mean, we're generally not in monkey mind. So right now, for example, if we're sitting here and I sense my mind drifting, into whatever, what I'm going to say in 5 minutes, it doesn't matter. My awareness task is going to be to give all of my awareness to my ears so I can listen to the words that are coming out of your mouth. So the awareness shift there is simply being with what's in front of me, being totally involved in listening to Brian speak. So if you're out at work and that monkey mind gets going and it just makes it really hard to work, get up if you have to, stand on your own 2 feet, recognize you're there. And on some level, if you're able, get completely involved in what you're doing, really interested, even if it's drafting an email, get completely involved in drafting that email, clicking send, whatever it is that's in front of you.
So the way that I'm going to summarize my own adventure here, based on everything you just shared, Mark, I have 4 steps of rules and engagement when my monkey mind starts going crazy. So the first step is don't pick a fight with the monkeys. The second step is create space between the stimulus and response, right? In Brian's scenario, I could eviscerate the people who sold me these lights and pollute my own inner system and be angry. Or I could create a space, take a breath, and look at the situation differently. Step number 3 is now bring curiosity to that situation, right? Get curious about what is it that I'm feeling here? Why am I feeling it? Kind of like, when that 6'6" guy bulldozed his way through me, why did I feel so emasculated? Why did I feel so disempowered? Why did I want, right? So look at the situation with curiosity, non-judgment. And then the 4th step is placing my awareness on something more empowering. So as Michael Singer would say, your awareness, your light of consciousness is the most important thing in your universe. If I'm focused on pain, then I'm going to experience pain. If I'm focused on abundance or gratitude or, anything else that's more empowering, love, then I experience that. So those are the 4 steps that I'm going to be practicing leaving here. And I don't think this could have come at a better time based on everything that I'm going through right now.
Well, I feel, on some level, what all this leads to, and really I feel one of the concepts that sort of creates an umbrella over all of this is the idea of becoming a better friend to ourselves. Because all of these experiences, all this stuff, right? These things that we beat ourselves up over, that could be something related to an event that happened in your life when you were 10 years old. So if you're sitting here today, just beating the shit out of yourself because you have a thought or you have a rumination and you don't know why, just understand that you could literally be beating the shit out of the 10-year-old little boy that's inside of you. That's no good, because that person, that energy that still resides in you needs nurturing and it needs love. And, It's funny, the men that I work with, particularly when they get into a cycle of self-judgment, I hear the words they say, the whole, I see guys literally smacking their forehead, right? Just literally beating on themselves. And so I'll ask the question, have you ever given yourself a hug? Like literally wrapped yourself in a hug to embrace yourself? Have you ever talked to yourself or asked yourself questions? It's like, no, that's crazy. Like, what would that do? I'm like, well, you're beating the shit out of yourself and you're judging yourself. What's that supposed to do? It's just the opposite side of the same coin. Like if you're willing to try one, you got to be willing to try the other. And for me, I give my mind instruction. And lately, especially over the last 2 weeks, I've been giving my mind instruction every single morning. And it's right after I wake up and I tell my brain, I say, brain, today, I do not need a commentator in my life. I do not need an announcer. If I'm doing something, I know I'm doing it, and you don't have to tell me and remind me what I'm doing. Like I'm literally going to put a can of seltzer to my mouth. The brain goes, it's putting can of seltzer to its mouth. I'm like, no shit. I'm looking at the can. It's in my hand. Like I see that. So, I feel that idea of befriending the self, being kind to the self, really approaching what's happening in your inner world with curiosity, compassion, and love is one of the best ways that some of this stuff can sort of be soothed, because it's just like, a dog looking for a bone. These thought forms come at us, and the more attention, the more time that we unnecessarily give them, we just energize them. We energize them. If we sort of de-energize like these sort of ruminations and these thought patterns and this awfulizing that sort of regularly comes up by doing some of these things, asking it a question. Hey, monkey, Brian, I know, we talked about giving the monkey a name. Hey, Benjamin, I see you're back. What do you need me to know today? Benjamin the monkey,
I've never been very good at names, so I just name my monkey
the monkey.
And then I say, hi, welcome, monkey. Mark, as you're talking about this, the self-talk, I imagine if I was watching a movie and the movie was about Mark's monkey mind, it would be boring as fuck. It would be like Mark taking the can of seltzer, bringing it to his lips and whatnot, right? I think it'd just be boring as fuck. That said, I think if the monkey mind wasn't involved and the movie was about Mark without monkey mind, like fascinating. Like Mark is a fascinating dude doing really interesting and big things in the world. Otherwise boring. Something I'm telling myself is like when my monkeys come, it's like, dude, that's actually a boring part of your life. It's the same shit over and over again. Like, let's see something new.
Yeah. That 90% of what my monkeys have to say would be very, very boring, very dull indeed.
Mark, this has been an illuminating discussion and very timely, like I've mentioned a couple of times. For me, selfishly, I know that our listeners have gotten a lot out of it too. And you mentioned at the beginning of the episode that you are transitioning from your 12-year corporate career as an attorney into doing what you've been born to do, right? Which is to teach, to be a counselor, to be a yoga instructor, meditation, breathwork guide. And you are now the hottest free agent on the market, right? For men who can now, right? Because you have a schedule that's going to be free to do one-on-one coaching. And I know there are a lot of guys in our community who have been seeking a one-on-one coach that they can resonate with. You've been on the show a few times. Most of the guys in the community already know who you are, and they're thrilled that you're going to be able to do one-on-one coaching with them. What is the best way for them to reach you for those services? And what kind of, maybe like a 60-second commercial on what is the kind of one-on-one work that you're most fired up to do?
Absolutely. My email address, and I believe Dom, you'll share this, mark@DominicQ. Email would be the best way to reach me. You can also get me on Mark A. Melvin on Instagram, or if you're connected with me already on Facebook, certainly there. High level, the people that tend to enjoy working with me the most are explorers, are adventurers, and explorers and adventurers of their internal world. They're curious. They want to dig in. They want to know more. So what working with me looks like, there's going to be a couple sessions up front that are informational, kind of get to know you. Because for me, when I deal with someone one-on-one, I ideally do not want to have to replicate some like stock plan that lasts 8 weeks. Here's what you get. When I work with a person, my goal above everything else is to develop a deep personal relationship with that individual so that that person then has someone in their life, a lens, a reflective lens for working on themselves, someone to help facilitate their own explorations of answers for their own issues in their life, and ultimately start to build the tools to sort of abide calmly in all of the sort of stuff that life throws at us.
Beautiful. And in the show notes, I'm going to put at the very top the link to your email address, which is mark@dominichu.com. Mark, brother, thank you for another wonderful conversation, for the service you provide to the community. Love you, man. And here's to you, and your journey forward as you're wading your way through one of the more difficult times of your life.
Yeah, thank you so much. Love you, fellas. Really appreciate you having me. Great to see you guys today.
Hey, if you enjoyed this conversation with Mark as much as Brian and I did, we were lit up finishing the recording of this episode, I highly encourage you to come to the Great Man Within Facebook community group, put a post in that community group, tag Mark about what you learned in this episode or a question you have for him. Mark is highly visible and interactive in that community. It's a great way for you to connect with him. The other way is if you felt a deeper resonance and you want Mark's counsel and guidance. He's an exceptional one-on-one coach. He's changed the lives of so many of the men inside of our masterminds. The link for his email address is in the top of the show notes. So mark@dominichu.com. And also the link for the Facebook group is at the top of the show notes to get you in there. We will see you in the community chat.